In the quiet, tree-lined streets of Omaha, Nebraska, a young boy named Warren Buffett often felt a different rhythm beat within him. While other children chased baseballs or imagined grand adventures, Warren, with his spectacles perched on his nose, was already counting, calculating, and dreaming in numbers. His world wasn't just about play. It was about possibility, about the intricate dance of commerce, even in its simplest forms. From the tender age of 6, Warren's entrepreneurial spirit was undeniable. He wasn't content with pocket money. He wanted to earn it, to multiply it. He bought 6 packs of Coca-Cola from his grandfather's grocery store for 25 cents and resold individual bottles for 5 cents each, turning a neat 20% profit. It was a small venture, but in those clinking bottles and the satisfying jingle of coins, Warren found a profound joy. He meticulously tracked his earnings, a habit that would define his life. Each penny saved, each dollar earned, was a tiny victory, a stepping stone towards an unknown but deeply felt destiny. His most iconic early venture was his newspaper route. Every morning, before the sun had fully painted the sky, Warren would be out, pedaling his bicycle through the sleepy streets, a heavy bag slung over his shoulder. Rain or shine, snow or sleet, he delivered the Omaha World Herald. It wasn't just a job. It was a masterclass in logistics, customer service, and delayed gratification. He learned the value of consistent effort, the importance of reliability, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He saw the world waking up, observed the patterns of human life, and all the while, his mind was whirring, dissecting the economics of his small enterprise. He wasn't just delivering news. He was delivering himself to a future he was painstakingly building, one newspaper at a time. He saved every cent he could, a quiet, almost solitary pursuit that set him apart, yet filled him with a deep personal contentment. By the time he was a teenager, Warren's ventures had diversified. He invested in pinball machines, placing them in barbershops and earning a share of the profits. He bought used golf balls, cleaned them, and resold them. He even bought a racehorse, though that particular gamble taught him a valuable lesson about the unpredictable nature of speculation. These weren't just childish games. They were serious business, each one a lesson in risk, reward, and the relentless pursuit of value. He felt a quiet frustration when his peers didn't share his intense interest in balance sheets and market fluctuations, but it only solidified his resolve. He knew, with an almost spiritual certainty, that his path lay in understanding the hidden mechanisms of wealth creation, not just for himself, but for something larger, something he couldn't yet fully articulate. His formal education, first at the Wharton School and later at the University of Nebraska, felt somewhat restrictive. He craved practical knowledge, real-world application, not just theoretical frameworks. He devoured books on finance, history, and business, often feeling that the true lessons were found outside the classroom walls. It was during this period of intellectual hunger that a book, almost by chance, fell into his hands and irrevocably altered his trajectory. Benjamin Graham's The Intelligent Investor. Reading Graham's words was like discovering a hidden language, a profound articulation of the very principles Warren had instinctively been groping towards. Graham preached value investing, buying a business for less than its intrinsic worth, focusing on its underlying assets and earnings power, rather than fleeting market sentiment. It was a philosophy of patience, discipline, and rational analysis, a stark contrast to the speculative frenzy that often gripped Wall Street. For Warren, it was a revelation, a guiding star that illuminated his path forward. He felt a deep intellectual connection to Graham, a sense that he had finally found his mentor, even before they had ever met. This wasn't just a book. It was a blueprint for a life's work, a connection to a mind that resonated deeply with his own. Driven by an insatiable desire to learn directly from the master, Warren applied to Columbia Business School, where Graham taught. He was initially rejected, a rare setback that stung his determined spirit. But Warren, never one to accept a no easily, wrote a passionate letter to Graham, arguing his case with such conviction that he was eventually admitted. It was a pivotal moment, a testament to his unwavering commitment. At Columbia, under Graham's tutelage, Warren found his intellectual home. He absorbed every lesson, every nuance of Graham's teachings, like a sponge. He learned to view stocks not as mere ticker symbols, but as fractional ownerships in real businesses. He learned the critical concept of the margin of safety, buying assets at a significant discount to their true value, providing a cushion against unforeseen events. This period was an emotional awakening, transforming his raw ambition into a refined, principled approach. He felt a profound sense of purpose, a quiet confidence growing within him as he mastered the tools that would define his legendary career. The connection with Graham wasn't just academic. It was a deep, almost paternal bond, shaping not just his investing philosophy but his character. After his time with Graham, Warren returned to Omaha, a city he loved for its grounded sensibility and distance from the frenetic pace of Wall Street. In 1956, at the age of 25, he started Buffett Partnership Limited, pooling money from family and friends. It was a modest beginning, with just $100,000 under management, but it carried the immense weight of trust. Each dollar represented someone's savings, someone's future, and Warren felt that responsibility deeply. He operated from a small, unassuming office, often working late into the night, meticulously researching companies, poring over annual reports, and seeking out undervalued gems. He wasn't chasing quick profits. He was building wealth, brick by painstaking brick, through diligent analysis and unwavering patience. His early investments were often in obscure, unloved companies, businesses that the market had overlooked or misunderstood. He bought into Dempster Mill Manufacturing, a struggling farm equipment company, and Sanborn Map Company, a business that created detailed fire insurance maps. These weren't glamorous investments, but they were deeply undervalued, offering a significant margin of safety. He faced skepticism from some, who questioned his unconventional approach, especially during bull markets when others were making quick gains through speculation. But Warren held firm, his conviction rooted in Graham's principles and his own meticulous research. He felt the pressure, the quiet doubt that sometimes crept in, but his belief in the long-term power of value investing was unshakable. This period was a crucible, forging his resolve and deepening his emotional commitment to his unique path. He wasn't just managing money. He was proving a philosophy, one successful, patient investment at a time. The true turning point, the moment that would define his legacy, came with Berkshire Hathaway. Initially, it was a failing textile mill in New Bedford, Massachusetts, a dying industry. Warren began buying shares in 1962, seeing it as an undervalued asset. His initial intention was to make a quick profit by selling the shares back to the company. However, a dispute with the company's management led him to acquire a controlling stake. It was an unexpected turn, a challenge that forced him to rethink his strategy. Instead of merely liquidating the textile business, he began to use Berkshire Hathaway as a vehicle to acquire other, more promising businesses. This was a profound shift, moving beyond simply buying cheap stocks to owning and operating entire companies. This decision marked the true birth of the conglomerate we know today. Warren faced immense challenges in transforming a failing textile operation into a diversified holding company. He poured his energy into finding businesses with durable competitive advantages, what he famously called economic moats. He sought companies that were easy to understand, had consistent earnings power, and were run by honest, capable managers. He wasn't just an investor anymore. He was a capital allocator, a business builder, a quiet architect of a vast financial empire. The emotional journey deepened here as he took on the full weight of corporate stewardship, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and countless shareholders. He felt the immense responsibility, but also a profound satisfaction in nurturing these businesses, allowing them to flourish under the Berkshire umbrella. His acquisitions became legendary. See's Candies, a seemingly simple confectionery business, taught him the power of brand and pricing power. Geico, an insurance company, showed him the magic of float, the money insurance companies hold before paying out claims, which he could then invest. Coca-Cola, a global icon, exemplified the enduring power of a beloved brand. Each acquisition wasn't just a financial transaction. It was a strategic move, a testament to his unique vision and his ability to see value where others saw only the mundane. He cultivated a culture of trust and autonomy, allowing the managers of his acquired companies to run their businesses with minimal interference, a testament to his belief in good people and sound management. His annual letters to shareholders became eagerly anticipated events, not just for their financial insights, but for their wisdom, humor, and transparent honesty. He was building not just a company, but a community, a philosophy, a way of life. As the decades passed, Warren Buffett became known as the Oracle of Omaha, a living legend whose pronouncements moved markets and whose advice was sought by leaders worldwide. His wealth grew to unimaginable proportions, making him one of the richest people on the planet. Yet, the most remarkable twist in Warren Buffett's story isn't the sheer scale of his financial success, but the profound simplicity and unwavering integrity with which he lived his life. Despite his immense fortune, he continued to live in the same modest house in Omaha, that he bought in 1958. He drove his own car, ate simple meals, and shunned the trappings of excessive wealth. His office remained unpretentious, devoid of flashy technology, reflecting his belief in fundamental analysis over fleeting trends. This wasn't an act. It was who he genuinely was. The true elevation of his story comes from understanding that for Warren, money was never the ultimate goal. It was a byproduct, a scorekeeping mechanism for a game he loved. The intellectual challenge of understanding businesses, the satisfaction of making rational decisions, and the joy of seeing his capital grow through the power of compounding. His greatest satisfaction, he often said, came from the process itself, from the intellectual pursuit, and from the trust placed in him by his partners and shareholders. He found immense joy in teaching, in sharing his wisdom, in demystifying the world of investing for the common person. And then, there is the ultimate act of generosity, the final, heartwarming chapter that defines his legacy beyond mere wealth. In 2006, Warren Buffett pledged to give away the vast majority of his fortune, primarily to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This wasn't just philanthropy. It was a monumental act of trust and selflessness, a testament to his belief in using wealth as a tool for global good. He didn't seek to build monuments to himself. Instead, he empowered others to tackle the world's most pressing problems. This decision, made with characteristic quiet determination, revealed the true heart of the Oracle, a man who understood that true wealth lies not in accumulation, but in contribution. His life, from the newspaper routes of his youth to the global stage of his later years, became a powerful narrative of patience, integrity, and the profound wisdom that comes from a life lived with purpose. It's a story that offers not just financial lessons, but a gentle, enduring message of hope, kindness, and the quiet power of a life well lived, dedicated to principles that transcend the fleeting allure of the market.